As I stood in the doorway, the weight of betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. My heart raced and my mind spiraled into chaos. How could she? The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, entwined with a wedding planner, a man whose very job was to orchestrate love stories. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, and in that moment I knew I had to act. It was a Thursday evening, a day that had always been mundane in our household. My wife, Sarah, had been unusually distant that week. I noticed her late-night phone calls and the way she would abruptly end conversations when I entered the room. I brushed it off as stress from work or perhaps the monotony of our routine. We had been married for nearly 10 years and I thought I knew her better than anyone else. I thought wrong. As I walked through the door that day, the smell of burnt pasta wafted through the air, mingling with the faint scent of perfume. It was an odd combination, one that struck me as both familiar and foreign. I called out to her, but there was no response. My gut twisted, something wasn't right. I made my way to the living room, and that's when I saw it, a picture on the coffee table. It was a photo of Sarah with him, the wedding planner, Jake. They were laughing, their faces lit up with joy, as if they were sharing a secret that the world couldn't know. I picked up the photo, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the heat rising to my face, anger and betrayal intertwining into a knot in my stomach. I wanted to scream, to throw the picture against the wall, but I stood frozen, paralyzed by disbelief. Then it all came crashing down. I remembered a name I had heard in passing, a name that had slipped through the cracks of my mind: Jake, the wedding planner who had helped organize our friend's wedding last summer. Sarah had talked about him, about how charming he was, how he could make any event magical. I had thought nothing of it at the time. Now it felt like a dagger to my heart. My mind raced back to the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the sudden changes in her schedule. I had been blind, unwilling to see the signs that were so glaringly obvious. I felt like an idiot, a fool who had trusted too blindly. The betrayal stung more than any physical wound ever could. I paced the room, my thoughts spiraling into a dark abyss. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, the desire for revenge igniting like a flame. How could she do this to us? To our family? I thought of our children, of the life we had built together. Was it all a lie? The trust I had placed in her shattered in an instant. I needed to confront her, to hear her side of the story, to understand how she could betray our vows so easily. But a part of me wanted to take action, to ensure that Jake understood the consequences of his actions. I couldn't let this go unpunished. He had taken something from me, something irreplaceable, and I would make sure he paid for it. As I waited for Sarah to return home, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, a clarity amidst the chaos. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self. I would not be a victim in this story. I would take control. With that resolve, I picked up my phone and started planning my next steps. The wedding planner would learn the hard way that love stories could be twisted, and sometimes the orchestrator of those tales would find himself in the most unexpected drama of all. Before the betrayal, Sarah and I had what I believed was a solid marriage. We met in college, both bright-eyed and full of dreams, and our relationship had blossomed amidst late-night study sessions and shared ambitions. I remember the first time I saw her, sitting in the library with her head buried in a book, her long hair cascading over her shoulders. She was captivating, and I was drawn to her intellect and warmth. We quickly became inseparable, sharing not just our lives but our hopes and fears. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, meticulously planned and filled with the laughter of family and friends. I remember standing at the altar, watching her walk down the aisle in a stunning white dress, her eyes sparkling with joy. It felt like the beginning of a fairy tale. We promised to love each other, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. It was a promise I took to heart. In the years that followed, we built a life together. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood and welcomed two beautiful children into the world. Parenting brought its own challenges, but we navigated them together, supporting each other through sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. I thought we were a team, partners in every sense of the word. But as the years passed, I noticed small cracks in our foundation. The late-night phone calls became more frequent, and I brushed them off as her needing time to unwind after a long day. I was busy with work, trying to provide for our family, and I convinced myself that her distance was just a phase. I never once considered that she might be looking for something, or someone, outside of our marriage. Sarah had always been the more social one, the life of the party. While I was content with quiet evenings at home, she thrived in social settings, often volunteering to help with events in the community. It was during one of these events that she met Jake, the wedding planner. I remember her coming home excited, telling me about the vibrant atmosphere and how talented he was. I had thought nothing of it at the time. After all, weddings were his specialty, and he was just a colleague. Looking back, I realize I ignored the subtle changes in her demeanor. She started dressing differently, wearing outfits that seemed more youthful, more vibrant. The spark in her eye when she spoke about work became more pronounced, as if there was a new thrill in her life that I was not a part of. I should have questioned it, but I didn't want to seem insecure or paranoid. I trusted her implicitly, too much so, and that trust would soon be my downfall. The signs were there, but I was too wrapped up in my own world to see them. I was busy trying to climb the corporate ladder, working long hours to secure a future for our family. I thought I was doing everything right. I believed that as long as I provided for them, my love would be enough to keep our family intact. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I finally discovered the affair, it felt like a punch to the gut. I replayed our history together in my mind, searching for moments that hinted at her discontent. I remembered the subtle arguments over trivial matters, the way she would roll her eyes when I suggested a family night in front of the TV. I had chalked it up to the stress of balancing work and family life, but now it felt like a warning sign I had ignored. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It was as if the very fabric of our life together had unraveled before my eyes. I thought of our children, innocent and unaware of the chaos brewing beneath the surface. They deserved better than this fractured version of a family. My heart ached for them, and yet there was a growing anger inside me, a fire that demanded justice. As I sat in the living room, the picture of Sarah and Jake still in my hand, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. Love, anger, betrayal, and sadness all competed for dominance. My heart was heavy, but I had to focus on what came next. I couldn't let this go unanswered. I needed to confront Sarah to understand how she could betray everything we had built together. But more than that, I needed to make Jake pay for his role in this tragedy. The man who had orchestrated this affair would soon learn that love stories don't always have a happy ending. I would make sure of it. When Sarah finally walked through the door that evening, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. She looked radiant, her hair cascading over her shoulders, a smile plastered on her face. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. I was standing in the living room, the photo of her and Jake still clutched tightly in my hand. The moment she stepped into the house, I knew that everything would change. "Hey, love, how was your day?" she asked, her voice bright and cheerful as if nothing was amiss. I could feel the tension in my chest tightening, my heart pounding against my ribs. I took a deep breath, willing myself to remain calm, but I could feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with an urgency I couldn't hide. The smile faltered on her lips, and I watched as confusion flickered in her eyes. She set her bag down and looked at me, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing. I held up the photo, my hand shaking slightly. "This," I said, my voice low but firm. "I found this on the coffee table. Care to explain?" Her face paled as she glanced at the picture. I watched the realization wash over her, the way her breath caught in her throat. She stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "It's not what it looks like." I could feel the heat rising in my face, the anger boiling over. "Not what it looks like. You're in a photo with him, Sarah. You've been seeing him, haven't you? All those late nights, the phone calls, was I just supposed to ignore it?" She took a step back, her hands trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was just trying to plan some events, and Jake, he's charming, and I got caught up in it." "I never wanted to hurt you." "Caught up in it," I echoed, my voice rising. You're having an affair with a wedding planner, for God's sake. How could you do this to us, to our family?" The words spilled out in a rush, fueled by a whirlwind of emotions. I felt betrayed, angry, and above all, utterly devastated. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment I almost felt sympathy for her. But the pain of her betrayal overshadowed any compassion I could muster. "I loved you, Sarah. Built a life together, and you threw it away for some fleeting excitement." "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could handle it, but I can't lose you." "Then why did you risk it all?" I shot back, my voice trembling with hurt. "Why did you let him into our lives, into our home?" "I don't know," she exclaimed, exasperated. "I don't know how it happened. I just wanted to feel alive again. Things have been so dull, so routine. I thought I could find a spark, something to reignite our marriage, but it spiraled out of control." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. I had sensed the distance between us, but I never imagined it would lead to this. I had been so focused on work, on providing for our family, that I had neglected the emotional connection we once shared. But that didn't excuse her actions. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked, my voice low and filled with pain. "You've shattered everything we built together, our trust, our family. It's all in pieces now." I know," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't leave me. I love you." The desperation in her voice struck a chord, but I couldn't shake off the betrayal. "Love, how can you say that when you've been with him? You've chosen him over me. You've made your choice." "I made a mistake," she pleaded, stepping closer, her hands reaching for mine. "I want to make it right. I'll end it with him, I promise." I pulled my hand away, the pain of her touch stinging more than I anticipated. "You think it's that simple, that you can just erase what you've done? You can't just pretend it didn't happen?" The tears streamed down her face, and I felt a pang of guilt for the pain I was causing her. But I couldn't allow sympathy to cloud my judgment. This wasn't just about her. It was about me and the betrayal that had turned my world upside down. "I need time to think, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but filled with hurt. "You've broken my trust in a way I never thought possible. I don't know if I can forgive you or if I even want to." As I turned away from her, I felt a cold emptiness settle in my chest. The confrontation had not brought me any closure. Instead, it had opened the floodgates to a storm of emotions I wasn't prepared to face. I needed to regain control, not just over my emotions, but over the situation as a whole. I had to make Jake pay for what he had done. He had taken my wife away from me, and I couldn't let him get away with it. It was time to take action, to plan my revenge. After the confrontation with Sarah, I found myself packing the floor of our living room, my mind racing. The anger that had ignited within me was now a smoldering fire, and I needed to find a way to channel it. I couldn't just sit back and let this wedding planner, Jake, continue to thrive while I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered life. No, I had to act, and I had to act decisively. I sat down at the kitchen table, my heart pounding against the confines of my chest. I took a deep breath and began to sketch out a plan. Revenge wasn't just about making Jake suffer. It was about reclaiming my dignity and showing him that he couldn't meddle in my life without consequences. It was about making him understand that his actions had repercussions. I started by gathering information. I remembered Sarah mentioning how Jake was well connected in the wedding industry, his reputation glowing with praise. He had a portfolio full of stunning weddings, and couples raved about his ability to create fairy tale experiences. But I knew that even the strongest reputations could be tarnished with the right push. I needed to dig deeper to find a way to expose him. I spent hours online, researching Jake's business, his clients, and his connections. I found his website, which showcased his work, complete with testimonials from satisfied couples. But beneath the shiny exterior, I sensed vulnerabilities. I learned about the weddings he had planned, the venues he worked with, and the vendors he collaborated with. All of it was a potential goldmine for my plan. I decided that my first step would be to reach out to some of his clients, the couples who had hired him for their upcoming weddings. I crafted a series of emails, each designed to plant seeds of doubt. I posed as a concerned friend, warning them about Jake's unprofessionalism and questionable morals. I hinted at the affair with Sarah, suggesting that he was not the trustworthy figure they believed him to be. I knew I had to be careful. If I was too aggressive, it could backfire and make me look like a jilted husband seeking revenge out of spite. I had to play it smart, to ensure that my words carried weight without sounding bitter. I spent hours crafting the perfect messages, each one tailored to the couple's specific situation, ensuring they felt like genuine warnings from a friend. As I hit send on the first batch of emails, a rush of adrenaline coursed through me. I felt a sense of power that I hadn't experienced since the discovery of Sarah's infidelity. I was taking control and it felt good. In the days that followed, I continued my campaign. I reached out to more clients and the responses were mixed. Some were grateful for the heads-up, while others dismissed my warnings as the ramblings of an angry ex. But that only fueled my determination. I was relentless, and I knew I had to escalate my efforts. I began to gather evidence. I followed Jake's social media accounts, documenting his interactions with clients and vendors. I took screenshots of his posts, noting the comments praising his work. I wanted to build a case that would expose him as a fraud, someone who couldn't be trusted to handle the most important day of a couple's life. I also considered reaching out to vendors who worked closely with him. I could plant doubts in their minds as well, sowing discord among his professional relationships. If I could turn the tide against him within the industry, it would be a massive blow to his reputation. The more I plotted, the more I realized how deeply this was consuming me. I was spiraling into a dark place, where revenge was all I could think about. I had to remind myself of the ultimate goal. This wasn't just about hurting Jake. It was about reclaiming my life and my sense of self-worth. I needed to remind myself that while I was hurt, I was also stronger than I had ever been. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line. I was becoming the very thing I despised, a person driven by vengeance, willing to hurt others to heal my own wounds. I wrestled with the moral implications of my actions, but the anger I felt toward Jake overpowered my conscience. As I continued to execute my plan, I realized that I needed to be prepared for the fallout. How would Sarah react if she found out what I was doing? Would she see me as a villain, or would she understand that I was fighting for our family? I dismissed those thoughts. They didn't matter. What mattered was putting Jake in his place. I spent the nights devising new strategies, and as I did, I felt a sense of purpose returning to my life. I was no longer just a heartbroken husband. I was a man on a mission. I would make Jake regret ever crossing me, and I would ensure that he lost everything he had built. Soon, I would unleash my full plan upon him. It was time to make the wedding planner pay for his sins. The day I decided to put my plan into full effect, I woke up with a sense of determination that coursed through my veins. I had spent weeks strategizing, and now it was time to execute my revenge on Jake. I felt a mix of excitement and dread, knowing that I was about to cross a line that I could never uncross. But the anger I felt towards him, towards the betrayal, pushed me forward. The first step was to solidify my network of disgruntled clients. I had already sent out several warning emails, but now I needed to take it a step further. I decided to host an anonymous online forum where couples could share their experiences with wedding planners. I created a fake account, carefully crafting my persona as a concerned individual who had heard troubling rumors about Jake's practices. I posted a warning on the forum, detailing my experience with Jake and how he had let down a couple I supposedly knew. I painted a vivid picture of mismanagement and unprofessionalism, claiming that he had ruined their wedding day due to his negligence. I included fabricated testimonials from friends who echoed my concerns, creating an echo chamber of doubt around his reputation. The responses came flooding in. Couples began to share their own experiences, some echoing my sentiments, while others expressed their hesitations about working with him. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I watched Jake's pristine reputation begin to crack. It was intoxicating to see the seeds of doubt I had planted take root. Next, I turned my attention to the wedding vendors who frequently collaborated with Jake. I reached out to several of them, posing as a potential client seeking recommendations. During our conversations, I subtly dropped hints about Jake's alleged unprofessional behavior, weaving in my concerns about his reliability. I could sense their hesitation as they began to question their association. With him, one of the vendors, a florist who had worked with Jake on multiple occasions, expressed her doubts about his commitment to his clients. "I've heard some things, but I always thought he was great," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I seized the opportunity, encouraging her to consider other planners. "You deserve to work with someone who truly values their clients," I said, planting the seeds of doubt further. As the days turned into weeks, I watched as Jake's empire began to crumble. Clients started to cancel their contracts with him, citing concerns over his professionalism. I reveled in the chaos I was creating, my heart racing with a mix of satisfaction and guilt. I knew I was playing with fire, and yet I couldn't stop myself. The thrill of revenge was addictive, and it fueled my every move. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. I was consumed by this vendetta, my thoughts constantly revolving around Jake and how I could further dismantle his business. I found myself losing sleep, my mind racing with plans and counterplans. I had become a puppet master, pulling strings and watching the fallout with a twisted sense of enjoyment. One evening, I received a message from a couple who had hired Jake for their wedding. They were seeking my advice on whether they should go through with their plans. I seized the moment and laid it on thick. "I've heard some disturbing things about him," I wrote, carefully crafting my words. "You might want to reconsider your options." Their response came quickly. They thanked me for the heads up and mentioned they would look into other planners. Each cancellation felt like a small victory, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of Jake's growing panic. I envisioned him sitting at his desk, watching his client list dwindle, feeling the pressure of his crumbling reputation. But amidst the chaos, I began to feel the weight of my actions. I was inflicting pain on Jake, not just professionally but personally. I could only imagine the stress he was under, the fear of losing everything he had worked for. I had to remind myself that he had brought this upon himself, that he was the one who had crossed the line first. But still, a part of me wondered if I was becoming the very monster I had despised. One night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the past few weeks in my mind. I thought about Sarah and the life we had built together, the moments we had shared before everything fell apart. I felt a pang of longing for the love we once had, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger I had for her betrayal. I had made my choice, and I was committed to seeing it through. As I prepared for the final phase of my plan, I knew I had to go big. I wanted to ensure that Jake's reputation was irreparably damaged. I decided to reach out to a local wedding magazine, the same one that had featured him in glowing articles about his work. I crafted an anonymous tip, detailing the affair with Sarah and the unprofessional behavior that had led to several couples canceling their contracts. I knew this would be the final blow. If the magazine picked up my story, it would spread like wildfire, and Jake would be left scrambling to salvage his reputation. I felt a surge of satisfaction at the thought of him being publicly humiliated, of his name being dragged through the mud. As I hit send on the email, I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with dread. I was about to unleash something I couldn't control. But in that moment, I felt powerful, like I was finally taking back control of my life. I had turned my pain into a weapon, and I was ready to watch it all unfold. In the days following my anonymous tip to the wedding magazine, I felt a growing anticipation. I had done everything I set out to do, orchestrating a downfall for Jake that would ensure he would never walk down the aisle again, at least not as a wedding planner. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety as I waited for the inevitable backlash. When the article was published, it was everything I had hoped for. The headline read, "Wedding Planner's Dark Side, Affair and Unprofessionalism Exposed." My heart pounded as I read the details, recounting the affair with Sarah, the warnings from disgruntled clients, and the growing list of cancellations. The fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with comments and shares, and Jake's reputation plummeted like a stone. I watched in disbelief as couples who had once praised him began to distance themselves, posting on forums and social media about their decision to look for other planners. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had succeeded in my mission. I had taken down the man who had tried to take my wife away from me, and it felt like I was finally reclaiming my power. But as the days turned into weeks, the initial thrill of victory began to fade. I started to feel the weight of my actions settling heavily on my shoulders. I had become a puppet master, pulling strings and watching the destruction unfold. But now, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. I had achieved my revenge, but at what cost? I began to reflect on the choices I had made. I had hurt not only Jake, but also countless couples who had trusted him to make their wedding day special. I had played a role in ruining lives, and despite his betrayal, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The thrill of revenge was now overshadowed by guilt and remorse. One evening, I found myself sitting across from Sarah at the dinner table, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I had been distant, consumed by my plans for revenge, and she sensed the change in me. "You've been so quiet lately," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" I looked into her eyes, searching for the love I had once felt, but all I saw was the pain of betrayal reflected back at me. "I've just been busy," I replied, trying to deflect. But the truth was I was wrestling with my conscience, grappling with the consequences of my actions. "Is this about Jake?" she asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "I know you're hurting, but we need to talk about this. We can't just ignore it." I felt a wave of anger rise within me. "What's there to talk about, Sarah? You had an affair with him. You shattered my trust." I snapped, my voice rising. "And now I've made sure he pays for it." "But at what cost?" she pressed, her eyes pleading. "You've hurt so many people in the process. I don't want to see you become someone you're not." Her words struck a chord, and for the first time I realized the truth in them. I had become so consumed by my desire for revenge that I had lost sight of who I was. I had let the anger and betrayal transform me into a person I didn't recognize, a man willing to hurt others to soothe his own wounds. As I sat there, I began to question everything. Was this truly the path I wanted to take? I had wanted to reclaim my dignity, to show Jake that he couldn't just waltz into my life and tear it apart. But in doing so, I had become a reflection of all the things I despised. That night, I made a decision. I would reach out to Jake, not to gloat or seek further revenge, but to confront the situation head-on. I needed to understand the man behind the wedding planner, to confront the reality of my choices. It was time to take responsibility for my actions and find a way to move forward. I found his contact information online and hesitated before hitting send on a message. "Jake, I want to talk. We need to discuss what happened between you and Sarah and the fallout that followed." The response came quicker than I expected. "I'd like that. I owe you both an apology." As I prepared for our meeting, I felt a mix of apprehension and relief. I didn't know what to expect, but I was ready to face the consequences of my actions, to take a step towards healing, not just for myself but for Sarah and even for Jake. When we finally met, the tension in the air was palpable. Jake looked different, humbled perhaps. We exchanged pleasantries, but the weight of our shared history hung heavily between us. I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. "I want you to understand how your actions affected my family. I lost my trust in Sarah, and I lost myself in the process of seeking revenge on you. I don't want to carry this anger anymore." He nodded, remorse evident in his eyes. "I never meant to hurt you or your family. I got caught up in something I didn't fully understand, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused." As we talked, I felt the tension slowly dissipate. We exchanged stories, and for the first time I began to see him as a flawed human being rather than just the enemy. We had both made mistakes, and while the scars of betrayal would take time to heal, acknowledging our shared pain was a step towards closure. In that moment, I realized that revenge had not brought me the satisfaction I had hoped for. Instead, it had consumed me, turning me into someone I didn't want to be. I learned that healing comes not from vengeance but from understanding and forgiveness, both for ourselves and for those who have wronged us. As I left that meeting, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had taken control of my narrative not through revenge but through acceptance and understanding. I could finally begin to rebuild my life, to reconnect with Sarah, and to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. In the end, I learned that love and trust can be fragile, but they can also be rebuilt. And while the scars of betrayal may remain, they can serve as a reminder of the strength that comes from facing our darkest moments with courage and compassion.